Hi everybody, salut à tous, it's Daniel. This week's texture for our Rocky series is going to be a topsoil. So this is what we are going to do. Show the end result in Designer. I'll use only one small reference, this one. It's not much, but it's part of the exercise. We all know that reference is crucial, and it's recommended to amass a lot of it for a project, but sometimes, rarely, working from memory is an interesting exercise. Okay, let's start with a quick analysis, breakdown of the project and its challenges. We need at least two layers. A base layer, which role is to bring the bumpiness of the soil. It will be firm, compact, and won't have too much detail, other than some mini holes and a simple dirt texture. Then a second layer will bring broken lumps of dry dirt, and those lumps must be scattered very fluidly, naturally across the ground. This is the difficult part of the project. It must look convincing, otherwise it's a fail. Then we'll proceed with some small openings in the top, some small valleys to give the illusion of some soil erosion. And we'll finish with cracks. Okay, analysis done. Let's make it now. So step 1. Let's make our base layer. Let's go ahead and blend two noises, a moisture noise and a fractal sum one. We won't change anything on the moisture noise. Let's try the overlay mode in the blend. And to sculpt the top a little, we can use a purlin noise. So let's blend it, still with overlay. The purlin noise goes into the background. Now it's time to bring some texture on top of this base, something simple and even rough. I'll use a height blend and just blend our result with itself. We can do that by introducing a simple transform 2D and rotate it. This way we can fill the black spaces. Now I'd like a slope blur, just to make it rougher. In the grayscale slot I put the blended height, and in the slope slot the output of the previous blend node. Samples 32, intensity 0.1 and mode min. And to finish our base layer, let's use a directional warp just to give it some waviness. In the intensity input, let's send the purlin noise, change the angle and set the intensity to 5. So that's it for the start of this material. Step 2, the top layer. This is the most difficult part of this project, but not to worry, I already found by accident a quick technique to make this well scattered lumpy dirt. I was looking for a new way to make cracks by using a technique that Daniel Tiger shows in its Fundamentals series. It's based on a distance node and an edge detect node. To work with the distance node, we need to crank up the contrast on our present texture. So that's where a histogram scan comes into play. Position 0.6 and contrast 0.3. That goes into the mask input of the distance node. The source takes the directional warp output. Then, to have a good result with the edge detect node, well, let's bring it now. You'll see. I'll send the distance output to it, work with a with a high tolerance of 1 and a very small edge width and no roughness. So as you can see, not what we are looking for. But we can make it way better by simplifying the distance output. You could try the quantize node, but it would be too rigid, for lack of a better word. We can have a much better result with the vector morph. So let's send the distance in it, and the vector field needs to be a color image. It's called the flow map. The technique that you can use is with a normal map. So let's bring in 1. An intensity of 3 or 4 should be enough. Let's settle with 3. And then, what to take as an input? Well, the noisiest thing that we have, and it's probably this, our first blend node. So let's use it. Now I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this quantize node. We need a better grayscale range after this edge detect. We need subtleness, right? So what would you do? How to give this a range to work with? I guess the slope blur is the answer. So let's send our directional warp to it. A very small intensity will do, 0.05. Let's create frames to keep things clear. A base layer frame and the top layer frame. Our graph is still readable, simple. We're on the right track. Let's combine the two layers together. In our blend node, you can try the copy mode, but I like the screened mode better, with a full opacity. Okay, it works, but I think we should break up the top layer more. We don't want those concentrations of dirt, it's not natural. We need more scattered lumps. There's a simple way to do that, but it is costly. We could increase the scale of the moisture noise to a maximum. We can see the improvement, but look at the processing time. It's too much. And I'm not overly satisfied with the change, so we gotta find something else. First, let's bring back the moisture scale to 1. So how to scale it for cheap? Well, there's a node that can do that. It's called the high pass grayscale. You just have to find the right radius. 5 should be right. Then, with the levels node, we can approach what we had with the high frequency details of the highly scaled moisture noise. Okay, it's close. So, it's fine this way. The two main layers are done and combined, and we already made a nice graph optimization. Right now it's a nice and calm topsoil, but we need more complexity. before moving on to the color pass. It's time for the cracks, ladies and gentlemen. So step 3. Let's go ahead and make 2 very different types of cracks with a small amount of nodes. Let's bring 2 cells 3 together with different values and a blend node set to min darken. 14.29 and a disorder of 1 for the first cells 3. And for the other one, a scale of 22, hardness 0.08 and no disorder. Okay. And to break this, a directional warp fed by our first directional warp. Change the angle and set an intensity of 12. Okay, so far so good. Let's use a levels node and just switch the blacks and the whites. This is an easy way to do the job of an invert node and still being able to play with the values in just one node. Before blending those cracks with a new blend node, we can just make them more interesting by sending them to a slope blur. And just use our previous blend node as the slope. So 32 min and 0.01 intensity will do the job. The blending mode, subtract, let's try 0.4 as the opacity. Okay, now let's try something. Like I said in the beginning, I'd like some erosion, so we can bring in a levels node and a transform 2D. In the levels, let's increase the whites to the max. And in the transform node, multiply the cracks by 4. It's cool, but when we do that, those cracks no longer tile. As we can see here, it's perfectly clear that they don't tile. So how to make them tile? Well, simply by using the Make It Tile photo. No settings needed. It works wonders with cracks. As for the blend opacity, let's try 0.5 rather. I'll add a frame for the cracks too. Now it's just a matter of making another blend and send the smaller cracks to it. Subtract and opacity 0.6. Okay, you know what? We can make those cracks more interesting by bringing in a multi-directional warp. In this case, I'll use the DT directional warp, or DT, I don't know the pronunciation, made by Daniel Tiger. It's a custom node, so it doesn't ship with Substance by default. But if you use 2 consecutive classic directional warp, you should be able to do something close, to produce a close result. Let's see how it works. You just need the cracks and an intensity input. This can be the first directional warp. In the intensity, let's try 8, and for the direction vectors, 3. Then a levels node to reinforce the whites. And subtract it from the height. Okay, let's make a frame for the cracks blending. We are making good progress. Next step, step 4, the color path and the roughness. I will produce a color map for the base layer and the top layer. So let's use a normal node, intensity of 3, then a curvature of smooth, a gradient map, and a blend. Let's choose overlay, 0.5. Okay, good. In the gradient editor of the gradient map, we'll sample this dirt. And to bring more variation to this, let's duplicate the gradient map and send through it the fractal sum1 noise. I'd like some grays and browns, light. So, as we did with the concrete tutorial last week, we can use those pebbles again to work with the gradient editor. Just play with the opacity and sample the bitmaps several times to find something that you like. Then we'll do the same thing for the top layer, but with different and lighter values. In the blend node, we can keep the overlay. Once again, take the time to try different values and variations. Let's blend the two colored layers with an add linear dodge and an opacity of 0.6. We can also make a mask, because we want this lighter layer to match the top layer details. So this mask is just the top layer height sent through an histogram scan with a high position value. Okay, now we gotta darken this a little. A simple subtract will do the job. As a mask, we'll use the same histogram scan as used earlier. And in the foreground, we'll use the top layer color. Okay, it's nice, but a little sad. It currently lacks some depth and life in the dirt. First, we can pop this up with the levels. Okay, better. We are gaining shades. And what about some lightness with an HSL node? Lightness 0.52, and we can bring down the saturation just a notch, 0.49. Okay, that's a nice topsoil that we have here. I like to use the torus from time to time to visualize something like that. Play with the height scale also. For this one, a scale of 2 is enough, I think. I guess we could work on the roughness now. It must be simple, so just use an invert coupled with a histogram range to turn it down. And voila, you've got a quick roughness map. Of course, if it was a complete material, this would require more work because there will be more details like roots, small stones, maybe some water puddles, old vegetables, grains, earthworms, feathers, bird poop, I don't know, you name it. That's when using reference can be useful. But it's important also to just have a simple and clean material like this. The rest of the details can come later in production. It's time for a final polishing pass. For example, I'd like to tweak the big cracks, the big erosion effect on the dirt. So it's in the cracks blending frame. It's just a question of finding the right opacity value. Try several. I'll probably settle for 0.55. Take time to visualize it with different lights and geometries. It's not an easy material to produce because it's not a clear surface. It's very organic and it's not something we see often, so it can be a challenge. And the main challenge is to make it look interesting. Sometimes there's not much to look at with a topsoil. Nothing is really defined. By adding a levels node just before the last color blend, you can get some leverage to play with the lightness of the finer lumps of dirt. Can be a nice addition. Yes, it's more interesting. It makes it look like there are many very small pebbles in the soil. Okay, let's try to optimize this graph. We already have the main frames, so that's a good thing done. We found a way to optimize the scale issue with the moisture noise. Let's check that our maps are properly tiling. Okay, good. Just a note, if you want to downscale or upscale the graph's parent size, it's not gonna work. Let me show you. At 1024, the cracks are messed up, and especially the smaller ones. So it's important for this project to stay at 2048 parent size, since we've made it at this size. Okay, I think the graph doesn't have any unnecessary nodes. If you want bigger lumps of dirt in the top layer, you can bring down the normal intensity here. Its intensity is what breaks the big lumps into smaller ones. It kind of breaks the web created by the edge detect node. So with this vector warp grayscale and the normal, we just break that. I feel like this topsoil is not too compact, not too dry, it's crumbly, it feels rich in my opinion. And if it were real, we could probably grow some plants. I don't know. Of course, we could go farther with this, make plow traces for example. There's a whole lot of additions that we can make, but it's up to you now. At least you have a base to start with. Well, I think we went around the subject. You have all that you need to build this material on your own, either by following along this video or by trying on your own after watching this. It's your choice. This video tutorial is now finished. For those who watched the whole thing, thanks a lot and well done. I really liked making this one. Can't wait for the next one on our Rocky series. Next Monday, it will be about beach pebbles. Yeah, see ya, bye everyone!